Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the Standing Committee on General Government, so I'd like to welcome all members of the committee, members of Legislative Research, the Clerk's Office, and of course Hansard, who do such great work, and welcome the presenters as well. This afternoon we're here to receive delegations regarding Bill 45, an act to enhance public health by enacting the Healthy Menu Choices Act 2014 and the Electronic Cigarettes Act 2014, and by amending the Smoke-Free Ontario Act. I just wanted to bring to your attention that there is a very high chance, a good chance of a vote this afternoon. It's Opposition Day motion. We may lose some time, so with the committee's approval, could we move from the 3 minutes as agreed to before down to say let's try 2.5 in order to be able to fit that time in? Otherwise we might drop off the last delegation, and that would be unfortunate if they make the effort to come. So having said that, Ms. Koala?
Point of order.
Point of order, Ms. Koala.
Chair, I would like to correct my record. Yesterday I referred to the Propel's Center analysis of youth smoking survey and speaking about flavored e-cigarettes as a possible gateway to regular tobacco use. I misspoke. The Propel study examines flavored tobacco, not flavored e-cigarettes. However, I know that the member for Lanark, Frontenac, Lennox and Addington in a point of order asked me to provide a study suggesting that e-cigarettes may be a gateway to regular tobacco use for youth, since he believed that no such study exists. I will provide the committee with 3. I am providing the committee with a study on molecular basis for nicotine as a gateway drug, published in the New England Journal of Medicine in September of 2014, which concludes that nicotine acts as a gateway drug on the brain, and this effect is likely to occur whether the exposure is from smoking tobacco, passive tobacco smoke, or e-cigarettes. I'm also providing the study risk factors for exclusive e-cigarette use and dual e-cigarette use and tobacco use in adolescents, published in Pediatrics in December of 2014, which suggests that e-cigarettes are recruiting medium-risk adolescents who otherwise would be less susceptible to tobacco product use. And finally, I'm providing a study from the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, published in Nicotine and Tobacco Research in August of 2014, which found that in a nationally representative sample of middle and high school students who had never smoked cigarettes, we found that youth who had used e-cigarettes were nearly 2 times more likely to have intentions to smoke conventional cigarettes than youth who had never used e-cigarettes. So I have those here.
Thank you very much, Ms. Koala. The first part of your point of order was a point of order. The second point, the second part, an explanation of the studies that you're going to show is not a point of order.
Okay.
But thank you very much for that. So we'll accept the point of order on correcting your record. At this particular time, I shall call upon Mr. Britton via teleconference, and I'd like to, he's from the UK Centre for Tobacco and Alcohol Studies, and I'd like to remind members of the committee that his presentation and or information is just under your agendas in the first pack. Mr. Britton, are you with us?
Yeah, I am. Thanks.
Welcome, sir. You have 5 minutes to make your presentation, followed by 2.5 minutes of questioning and or comments from the 3 parties involved. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. In view of the time shortage, I will move very quickly. The present or the information I would give is a very brief summary of the paper prepared for Public Health England by myself and Ilse Bogdanovica about a year ago. The thesis of the paper is that smoking kills a lot of people. 10 million smokers in the UK, half of those will die from smoking unless we do something about it, and that every year smoking recruits tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands even of new smokers in our country, and there will be very high figures in Canada too. That damage is caused not by nicotine, which is not a harmless drug, but is relatively harmless. It's because of all the other things in cigarette smoke that come with the nicotine. So nicotine addiction itself is not such a terrible thing, but smoking tobacco for it is pretty bad. Excuse me. Electronic cigarettes have arrived over the last 10 years and taken the market by storm, really. I won't go into the detail of the different designs that are used. They are getting better in terms of nicotine delivery as time passes. They're not safe. What we do know about them suggests that they deliver a similar spectrum of chemicals and toxins to tobacco, but in much, much lower concentrations. So I would expect that with a lifetime of use, an electronic cigarette will increase the risk of lung cancer, COPD, and heart disease possibly, but that increase in risk will be trivial and certainly trivial compared with that of smoking. So as a substitute for smoking, these products, however hazardous they prove to be, are a very sensible choice to the smoker. In England, and in the United States, certainly they have been taken up substantially by smokers, and the important thing there is that they demonstrate that smokers want a substitute for tobacco. Most smokers in most surveys want to quit smoking, but many don't find medical routes out of smoking terribly attractive, and cold turkey is the preferred attempt, but is extremely unlikely to succeed. The principle of harm reduction, of supplying smokers with nicotine from an alternative source that is socially acceptable and preferably not medicalized, is proven in Sweden and other Scandinavian countries, where snus has come to become almost the majority product for people who use nicotine. And snus, although like electronic cigarettes not safe, has remarkably less risk to the human health, and so that is why Sweden has the lowest cancer rates in young adults in Europe. And what it also proves is that if you give smokers an option which they buy in a corner shop, not in a pharmacy, and which is freely available and socially acceptable to go out and use snus with your friends when they're smoking, they will do it. And electronic cigarettes sort of fit that need, but do it with a cleaner product. The potential hazards are the hazards from the product itself, which I've alluded to, and then there's the consequences for smoking patterns. In smokers, the evidence in the UK is that about 20% of smokers now use electronic cigarettes on occasions, and about 700,000, so 7% of all of our smokers have quit using electronic cigarettes exclusively, and that's more than, excuse me, that's more than we achieve by other tobacco control measures as a single initiative, very quick initiative. There are the worries, much voiced worries, that smokers will dual use instead of quitting. Dual use of nicotine replacement therapy is actually recommended in our health guidelines, the National Institute for Clinical Excellence, because we know that people who dual use are more likely to quit. So smokers who use electronic cigarettes and real tobacco for a period are much more likely to quit than those who don't. There's the issue of gateway use, and I disagree with the interpretation. Well, there are newer CDC figures published just in the last few days, which are very similar to those in the UK, which demonstrate that among young people, the majority of those who use electronic cigarettes are those who live in families where cigarettes or electronic cigarettes are used and are therefore at high risk of taking up smoking anyway. The great majority of use in young people is amongst people who already smoke, and use among non-smokers is pretty negligible. It is growing and it may become a problem, but it's pretty low-key at the moment.
Much, Mr. Britton, and I apologize. As chair, I have to keep a strict schedule here, so we'll begin.
Okay, well, I'm pretty much done. So they're a good thing, and you need to, I think the right regulation for them is regulation that makes them easily available to smokers, not hard for them to use and choose. Sorry if I've overrun.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hillier.
Thank you very much, Dr. Britton, for joining us today and clarifying some of those things. I have mentioned, I've seen some of your work, and one of the things that we've seen in your work is that more people have quit smoking using e-cigarettes or vaporizers than all other alternatives from your studies. And it's interesting, you mentioned that there's a newer CDC report that was just issued a few days ago that demonstrate that vaporizers or e-cigarettes are not a gateway into tobacco, but more a gateway away from tobacco?
Yeah, I only came to see these figures in the last few days. I'm not sure when. I think they emerged in the last month anyway. They show a fall in, an increase in use of electronic cigarettes in U.S. high school students between 2011 and 2014 from about 2% to about 13%. And that is interpreted by CDC as a sign that electronic cigarette use will lead to smoking. But in the same surveys, the smoking rates in the same age group have dropped from about 16% to about 9% over the same period. So what we're seeing actually is a switch from tobacco to electronic cigarettes, and that's a good thing.
And you use the terms that that nicotine itself is, of course, not the harm in tobacco, and that I think you used the word any medical worries about vaporizers or e-cigarettes would be trivial.
The nicotine itself is probably about as hazardous as caffeine. Worries about the other constituents in the vaporizers should be proportionate to how clean the nicotine vapor they produce is. And of course, there's a huge variety in the products on the market. We have companies, both pharmaceutical and others, with medicinal grade products in the pipeline, and I think when they come, that will be quite a relief and will solve or resolve all these issues about how safe the product is. They'll then be as safe as they can be.
Thank you very much. I wish I had more time, but the chairman has given me the cutoff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jelinek.
Thank you for your presentation. I was curious to see, we are about to regulate e-cigarettes in Ontario, and just to be able to draw a parallel, in England, are people allowed to smoke in restaurants and bars?
Smoke tobacco? No, we've had comprehensive smoke-free policy since 2007.
So are they allowed to use an e-cigarettes in restaurants and bars?
There's no law forbidding it. What happens is that it becomes an issue of courtesy. And so I have once or twice gone into a pub where someone's been using the product, in fact, in my own local pub, and they were asked to stop by the landlady, and that was that. So it isn't actually a problem. But there are indoor settings where I think it could be extremely useful if they were available, and they include prisons, mental health settings, and other places where you have disadvantaged people with a very high level of smoking.
And here, we're not allowed to smoke within 5 meters of an entranceway. That would be about 12 feet.
Yeah.
Do you have a similar legislation in the UK?
No, our legislation. I mean, if the owner of a premise owns that part of the outside area, then yes. But no, smoking on pavements is still allowed. Though some cities, including Nottingham, are now moving towards smoke-free outdoor areas too.
So what kind of regulation exists in the UK? Are youth allowed to buy them and use them?
They are at the moment, but we will have an 18 limit from October, which is something I entirely support. We will also have tighter restrictions on promotion to stop them being used, particularly as a sort of medium to sell cigarettes through the back door. So we are putting in controls to protect young people and children. But I think these are proportionate controls. What we don't want, and why I would counsel against, that's why I contacted you, is regulation that makes it hard for smokers to make the sensible choice to switch to electronic cigarettes.
Just want to make sure, the answer you just give were for e-cigarettes, not for normal cigarettes.
Sorry, say again. The answer on...
The answer you just give me about the regulations coming in the fall for young people not being allowed.
Oh, sorry. No, young people can't buy cigarettes. They haven't been able to for a long time. Since 2007, we went up from 16 to 18. But for electronic cigarettes, at the moment they can, but there's a voluntary code that they shouldn't, and it will become law from October.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. From the government side, Ms. Koala.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being with us today in voice. The voice of Dr. Britton from Britain. That's great.
Thank you.
One of the things that I wanted to bring forward is that there's a lot of conflicting evidence about e-cigarettes, which is one of the reasons why we're looking at this legislation. And it seems to all boil down to each of our interpretations of the limited amount of evidence. And I know that all of my colleagues in the legislature are here in this role because they want to do the best for their citizens, and I need to reiterate that this is a precautionary legislation that we're bringing forward. But having said that, you've made some very impressive claims about the effectiveness of e-cigarettes as an alternative to cigarettes in Britain. But a study of English smokers just published in the journal Addiction found that regular e-cigarette use was associated with more smoking cessation attempts, not actual cessation. And another study of English smokers published in Nicotine and Tobacco Research found that non-daily users of the most popular kinds of e-cigarettes were actually less likely to quit smoking than people who had never used e-cigarettes at all. How do you reconcile your claims with those peer-reviewed studies?
Sure. Taking the second one, I think people who use the try it, don't get on with it. I'm a clinician. I see smokers, and I say, have you used electronic cigarettes? Yeah, I tried it. It didn't work. So people who don't find them effective will not use them regularly, and they need other help. But for those who do try them and use them regularly and exclude tobacco smoking, then they are a route out of smoking. And as I've said, that has happened for 750,000 smokers in this country. However, what's the other key thing about electronic cigarettes, as applies to snus as well, is that these products are applying across the whole spectrum of smokers. It's not those who go into their family doctor to say, hey, I'm thinking of stopping smoking, will you help me? It's not that population. It's the rest who never engage. So you have a great deal of experimentation amongst smokers as to see whether these products work. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right one for them or it's an effective substitute for everyone.
Okay,
So I would take those I've seen the figures, and I would take them with a pinch of salt. Final thing to say is
Final
that...
comment, sir.
Sure. Is that one solution to that, I suspect, is to build electronic cigarette use into the services that we provide for smokers, because it can be used with nicotine replacement therapy as a supplement and a socially acceptable supplement. So there are other ways around it.
Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Britton, this afternoon. Much appreciated. Enjoyed your comments.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation.
Quite welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye now. Okay, from the Canadian Cancer Society, the Ontario Division, we have Joanne DiNardo, Senior Manager of Public Issues. Welcome.
Thank you.
You have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chair, committee members. I'm Joanne DiNardo, Senior Manager, Public Issues, Canadian Cancer Society, Ontario Division. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today how we can work together to build a healthier Ontario. If passed, Bill 45 will prevent youth smoking, regulate e-cigarettes, help reduce obesity by giving Ontarians the information they need to make more informed dining choices. The Canadian Cancer Society applauds Bill 45. We hope the government will act quickly to pass and implement it, knowing that it has strong support from all political parties and Ontarians. The quick passage and implementation of this legislation will further protect youth from starting to smoke and would be groundbreaking for tobacco control in Ontario, across the country, and globally. It's been a long time that we've been advocating for a ban on youth-friendly flavored tobacco, so it's not a surprise that we're very pleased with this legislation. The ban was tried both provincially and federally in 2010, but proved to be unsuccessful when the tobacco industry exploited loopholes in the legislation to keep their products on the market. Flavored tobacco products are no longer niche products. They are widely used by the majority of youth who use tobacco products. In Ontario, more than 57,000 youth, grades 6 to 12, have reported using flavored tobacco product in the last 30 days. The inclusion of menthol in Bill 45 is both progressive and necessary. The rising use and popularity of menthol cigarettes amongst youth is concerning. More than 19,000 Ontario youth, or 1 in 4, who report smoking say they are smoking menthol cigarettes. The Society encourages the government not to delay the implementation of a menthol ban. The menthol ban should be implemented at the same time as the flavored tobacco ban to both reduce public confusion and to prevent the tobacco industry from having more time to find new ways to target our youth. One item not captured in Bill 45 is how to contend with flavored cigarette papers that are currently available for sale in Ontario. A ban on flavored cigarette papers when sold separately is included in the U.S. national legislation. and in the recently introduced Bill 90 in Nova Scotia, and that's undergoing hearings as we speak. The Society recommends that the committee consider including flavored cigarette papers in the flavored tobacco ban. Also important is that nearly 4 in 10 students believe smoking a water pipe is not as dangerous as smoking cigarettes, a belief that's simply wrong. Hookah lounges are becoming increasingly popular in Ontario, especially among youth. Some shisha contains tobacco, and some, called herbal shisha, does not. Both are often smoked in cafes and restaurants. Hookah lounges are circumventing the Smoke-Free Ontario Act by claiming the shisha is an herbal mixture, yet tobacco enforcement officers have found there to be tobacco in the shisha mixed or sold to accompany the mix. This is particularly concerning as there are no age restrictions at hookah lounges for hookah smoking. Studies from various jurisdictions have made clear that water pipe emissions, whether from shisha containing tobacco or from herbal shisha, are hazardous to anyone exposed to them, either by first-hand or second-hand smoking. We recommend that regulatory authority control the intercombustion of organic substances other than tobacco, like shisha, be added to Bill 45, so that an appropriate consultation and regulatory action on water pipe use can occur. We welcome the proposed regulations on e-cigarettes. There's significant confusion over the legal status, and it's difficult for consumers to know with certainty what is in an e-cigarette. Concerns have been raised over the toxicity of nicotine vapor, other byproducts of vaping, and the health risks to non-users. Banning the sale of these products to youth is a necessary measure to curb youth smoking. We would not object if an exemption on the display of products in specialty e-cigarette stores were to be made. Given that certain conditions are made, these conditions have been outlined in detail in a letter sent to committee members here from the Ontario Campaign for Action on Tobacco, as we are a member of that coalition. We strongly encourage the committee to not dilute Bill 45, keep it as strong as possible to have the maximum impact in the fight against cancer. Upon proclamation, Bill 45 should be implemented as soon as possible. This bill is about cancer prevention and public health, safeguarding our youngest citizens. Cancer is the single largest killer in Canada and the disease that is most feared by Ontarians. Each year, we lose 13,000 Ontarians to tobacco use, and our government spends $1.9 billion in direct health care costs. Today, 11% of Ontario youth in grades 6 to 12 have reported using tobacco in the past 30 days, and that's from the Youth Smoking Survey. With the vast majority of smokers starting before the age of 18, the need for stronger youth smoking prevention measures is great. I would like to thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great job, right within time. Ms. Jelinek.
Pleased to see you, Joanne. My first question is a question I've asked pretty much everybody that has presented, is can you think of any reason why we should delay the ban on menthol? I mean, the ban on all of the flavors are contained in the bill, it's clear, but could you see any reason why we should delay the ban on menthol?
We do not see a reason why we should delay the ban on menthol. If we're looking at Nova Scotia, for example, that has received second reading, their bills received second reading, they have included menthol with their ban, their flavored ban. So we would recommend that we see the same thing here in Ontario.
And we often hear about if we ban flavors, if we ban menthol, then people will go to the black market. Do you really think that this is an exercise in futility?
I don't. I think the most important thing is that we're preventing youth from smoking. And we know that menthol is being smoked by young people. And not all young people live next to smoke shacks. And we don't think that will be the case, and we think it will prevent cancer in the end by banning menthol. Okay.
When it comes to the banning of the hookah pipes, I support the way you were going. There's also vapor lounge. Does the Canadian Cancer Society or the Ontario Division, do you have a position on those?
We should be looking at age restrictions with regards to vapor lounges. Really, it is indoor smoking, and we don't know what's in those products, so we should seriously be looking at the regulation or the complete outright ban of those products. If we look at other jurisdictions in Middle Eastern jurisdictions, or like Turkey, they have severely regulated shisha and hookah use. So.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move to the government side. Mr. Rinaldi.
Well, thank you very much, Joanne. Great to have you here. And thank you for all the work that Canadian Cancer Society. I have a couple of advocates in my own riding. You might know these people, Jeff Brace and and Karen White.
Yes, we
that-
do.
That I can tell you they're attached to my hip. And Jeff is a Rotarian, the same club I belong to, and not one Friday morning to go by that we talk about the good work that the Canadian Cancer Society does. So thank you for that. So, and I know you touched on this on your opening statement, but can you, I mean, when we hear that, you know, that there is scientific evidence that indicates e-cigarettes are not a health risk, I mean, we hear this every day, and so can you elaborate from the work that the Canadian Cancer Society has done, that, you know, that there is a risk, I guess. Can you elaborate on that at all?
Well, there's a lot we don't know. So they're less risky. It's true, they're less risky than a regular cigarette, but there's still a lot we don't know. There's a lot of research that needs to be done. But this precautionary approach that's being assumed here in this legislation is a good one because we don't know, and because there could be a risk, and because they could be a starter product.
So following that, did the Canadian Cancer Society do any work in the, I mean, we've heard from a previous deputant from UK that this will help in the cessation, that, you know, it's better than what smoking cigarettes. So do we have anything that tells us?
So the same studies we would refer to are the ones that MPP Koala referred to in her questioning previously. Though that study in addiction and that study in American Journal of Public Health has shown they're not really effective in cessation. We need more to find out. But before we even go there, I think we need to understand that this product is not yet approved for use in Canada as a cessation product. So we're not even there yet. And that needs to happen before we start having that discussion.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rinaldi. Mr. Walker.
Thank you very much. Hi, Joanne. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
We seem to speak on the same topic often. I just want to cover a couple of things. So one of the things I'm struggling with, and it's been interesting to hear all the deputations, you know how strong I am against smoking, period, having lost my sister to lung cancer. But when you say youth-friendly, we've heard a lot of deputations saying the flavored e-cigs are actually helping them quit smoking. So I've got a real dilemma. If that's going to help them, and the proof is out right now whether it's good or bad for them. But at this point, if they're stopping smoking, I think that's a step in the right direction. So I applaud the whole idea of the youth, but I think we have to be very conclusive of whether we're also prohibiting others that might be helping their health care. Glad to see about the exemption on the products, because I just actually had a briefing from the minister's staff and clarified some of that stuff, that again, you know, you can see alcohol at a Raptors game being advertised. So to prohibit this, sometimes I think they've gone overboard in a very small mom and pop shop, so I want to see that happen. And two of the things that I've certainly raised in the House and in this committee is two things, and I'd like to get your feeling on it. One of the things is that they have not included any type of a ban to make it illegal for youth to possess, use, or sell cigarettes, which I believe is actually much more prohibitive. We have it with alcohol, and it seems to work pretty good. If you get caught with it, there's a fine, there's reprimands. Would you support that being included in this bill?
I wouldn't, and the reason I
Would not?
Would I support a ban on youth possessing tobacco?
For legislation to be created so that it would make it illegal for them to possess or sell?
No, I wouldn't support.
You would not support that?
No.
Can I ask why?
Because we've spent a lot of time trying to denormalize the tobacco industry and to really point fingers at the industry for addicting our young people. And as soon as we point those fingers at youth, we take the finger away from the industry. And the industry will continue to create products that are attractive to youth and get our youth addicted. Also, there are other jurisdictions in Canada that have this type of legislation. I think Edmonton, Alberta, for example. Edmonton and I forget the other jurisdiction at this point. But anyhow, what we found from those Western provinces is that we don't have any reports of success. There's no great success there.
So I'm not suggesting it's an either or, but I think it could have been actually something that would actually help make healthier choices to make that illegal. I mean, we've all been youth. I didn't drink before because I was worried about getting caught. If you can smoke and have that on a schoolyard, I'm concerned. In a similar vein, the other one that certainly is a concern is the contraband. So, you know, I have two teenage boys. This isn't have to be anecdotal or science-based. This is two people that I know pretty well saying to me, Dad, where most of the youth smoking is happening isn't from e-cigarettes or from flavored cigarettes. It's from buying a bag of 200 cigarettes for $8 as opposed to a carton for 90. So again, would you support contraband being part of legislation that would actually help to ensure that our youth do not have any easier access to tobacco?
Comment.
Yeah, we definitely have some measures already in place, and we are in constant communication with our Ministry of Finance and others about controlling contraband and further measures. So we definitely support the continued controls around contraband.
Thank you very much, and thanks for
Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much, Ms. DiNardo, for coming this
Thank you.
afternoon before committee. Appreciate it. Next, we have the Retail Council of Canada. We have Alison Baker, Director of Health and Safety and Industry Relations, and Gary Rigas, Director of Government Relations. Welcome to the two of you. 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And thank you for the opportunity to present to this committee today on Bill 45. My name is Alison Baxter. I'm the Director of Health and Wellness and Industry Relations at the Retail Council of Canada. And with me is Gary Rigas, our Director of Government Relations, Ontario. We'll be focusing our comments on Schedule 1, the Healthy Menu Choices Act 2015. The Retail Council of Canada has been the voice of retail since 1963, and we have members who operate more than 45,000 storefronts nationally, 17,000 of which are here in Ontario. RCC represents Ontario's grocery retailers, with our members accounting for over 90% of grocery retail sales. We wanted to begin our comments by indicating our support in general for menu labeling as an option to provide calorie information and enable Ontarians to make informed food choices. Retailers have been active participants in supporting the health and wellness of Ontarians, both collaboratively as an industry and as independent companies. They are also committed to ensuring that customers have accurate information that helps them make informed choices. The primary focus of this bill is for chain restaurants. As the primary focus is for chain restaurants, it was drafted with that business model and that consumer experience in mind. Although you can purchase ready-to-eat meals from the home meal replacement counter at a grocery store, behind the scenes the operations are very different, from the highly regulated environment to product variability and the broad range of size and combination options. As a result, if menu labeling is to apply to grocery stores, it cannot be a one-size-fits-all solution. RCC is recommending amendments and actions to ensure that the legislation will support consumers in making informed food choices, recognize the unique operations of grocery retail, be feasible to implement and enforce, and not conflict with existing federal requirements. Given the time constraints today, we will focus on a few key points and would direct committee members to our written submission for more detailed recommendations. The vast majority of products seen in the grocery store have nutrition labeling governed by the Federal Food and Drug Act and its regulations. It's absolutely essential that the Ontario government work closely with Health Canada and the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to ensure that the regulations for Bill 45, if passed, do not have unintended consequences or place retailers at risk of non-compliance. It's also important to note that these items were explicitly excluded from the nutrition labeling requirements of the Food and Drug Regulations due to the complexities inherent in providing this information for these items at the retail level. One of our sector's largest challenges with the proposed bill is the vague definition of standard food item and understanding how this will apply to the unique operations of grocery retail. This definition, combined with the signage provisions, would require every item, size, and potential combination to be labeled, posing significant implementation challenges. For example, consider the following common grocery retail items: fruit and vegetable trays where the content is not standardized, combination meals where the sides are selected from multiple options resulting in a high number of potential variations, family meals such as a rotisserie chicken with vegetables and potatoes where providing the calorie count for the whole meal would be misleading as it's not intended for a single person to consume in one sitting, sandwiches where an ingredient like cheese may change due to availability at the retail level, or multiple sizes for items like takeaway soups where many containers are intended to be multi-serve, or containers where the customer selects the amount and no standard serving size exists. Our written submission outlines specific challenges and further examples, but as you can see, the unique grocery environment presents challenges. The government must clarify the definition of standard food item to reflect the operations of grocery retailers by indicating that food items made in-store from non-prepackaged foods are not captured as they are non-standardized, standardized for portion and 10 single servings, and only items that are marketed intentionally for single serve are captured. For example, exclude produce, bakery, bulk bins, deli meats, etc. Not addressing these potential operational differences would significantly impact grocery retail operations, and we do not believe that that was the government's intent. With respect to menu boards and signage, we would recommend that the provisions take an outcomes-based approach rather than the prescriptive nature of the bill. The objective is for customers to have information on calorie content of foods at point of purchase, and this can be achieved in many different ways, and the differing layouts of grocery store, deli, and HMR counters requires flexibility. While restaurants typically identify their foods and pricing with a single menu board and/or menu, grocery stores identify foods and prices through individual shelf tags, product signs, menu boards, and pamphlets. Furthermore, there are regularly 100 to 150 items of hot and cold deli items that can potentially change on a regular basis. At a minimum, more compliance options should be included, and the provision should be changed to allow for the use of the option that works best under the circumstances. Maintaining Section 5 as written, rendering any municipal bylaws that would impose similar requirements inoperative, is essential to retailers' continued support of the proposed legislation. We would ask that the regulations apply only to items that are available for a minimum of 6 months. This would allow grocery retailers to continue to innovate, test new items with consumers, and offer new seasonal specials. Should those items become standard menu items, the menu labeling rules would of course then apply to them. Additional proposed exemptions are highlighted in our full submission. We strongly encourage the government to maintain the current focus on calories. The government should take the time to understand how the legislation works focused on calories before potentially expanding the scope. We would like to thank the committee again for the opportunity to share Grocery Retail's perspective on Bill 45. We look forward to continuing to work with MPPs and the government on the initiative, and we would welcome your questions.
Well, thank you very much, Allison. You are a speed reader out loud. That was
Trying
great.
to fit it in 5 minutes. Yeah.
Good for you. So we'll start with the government, and right on time, by the way.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for your presentation. You packed a lot in there. Could you tell me, please, were you consulted by the government on the proposed menu labeling legislation?
Yes. We were.
Okay, thank you. Do you believe calories are I think you said you believe that calories are the most appropriate nutritional information to post on menus?
Yes.
Okay. Bill 45's menu labeling are not overly prescriptive, rather implementation will be detailed through regulation, giving the government flexibility to respond to challenges, many challenges that you outlined, and a lot of them there. Are there any particular concerns that, the most important concerns you'd like to see addressed through regulation?
Through regulation, there's certainly a long list of concerns. I think, though, the most important are around those questions we raised about sort of the unique situation in grocery retail, where you really do have a lot of variability. It's not quite like the restaurant setting where the dishes are standardized. There could be variability in terms of the ingredients. There's variability in terms of how often things change. When you start talking about combination meals, there's so many different variations that something like that might work in a restaurant setting doesn't quite apply to retail. So really, I think I would describe it more broadly as having the opportunity to work with government on the regulations to understand the retail operations and make sure that there's a set of regulations that work specifically for that environment. And I would also add, a big concern for our members is making sure that there aren't any conflicts with the federal food and drug regulations, because certainly we are a very highly regulated environment in grocery retail. There's a lot of requirements around nutrition labeling and around nutrition claims, and our members always, of course, want to be in compliance, so it's important for us to make sure that the regulations under this legislation, if it's passed, wouldn't put us in any challenges with those regulations.
But you do agree there's flexibility within this bill?
No, absolutely. We think that there's flexibility within the bill. However, there are some sections, if you're talking about the bill itself, like for example around the signage, that I think that there could be a bit more flexibility within the legislation in that section that would address some of the concerns.
Thank you. We'll take your concerns back to the
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Walker.
Thank you very much. Nice to see someone else talk so fast. I usually get teased with that in the house in my word count. One of the things that I really note in here is the exemption from federal mandatory nutritional labeling because of the complexity and variation that occurs with store preparation. And that's certainly something from constituents and deputations that I've heard from is absolutely critical. The volume you handle, the ability, and one of the things I think we're trying to make sure we safeguard. No one's arguing that there isn't a better way and to be more healthier. I mean, who's not going to step up and support that? But it is the complexity. It is that ability. It is the ability for your retailers to ensure that they can comply, because most people don't want to be in non-compliance. The other, I think, is the item in regard to the municipal bylaws. So certainly can understand your concern from that perspective, that if in one jurisdiction they implement something different than another, confusing to the consumer, certainly confusing to the industry, and at the end of the day, we want people to find this as convenient and factual and consistent across the board as possible. So I think you're supporting that. Are there any real specific areas, particularly as we get into the more formal part of the bill and actually going back and forth clause by clause, are there any areas that really jump out at you that you really want the committee to take specific focus on?
Again, I think in terms of the actual language in the bill, I think that if there was an opportunity to clarify the language around what a standard food item is, I think that that could likely provide a lot of reassurance to our members. Again, it's something that I think was drafted with the intent of the restaurant industry in mind, as they are the primary focus, and it's a much more complex thought when you try and move that to the grocery retail. So some work to add some of the specificity we've recommended in that definition. And again, as I mentioned earlier, around the options for signage, I believe the provision right now requires that it's an and provision, so it has to be posted in both places, and there's fairly specific requirements as to what that is.
Right.
For grocery retailers, they might not always have that option, or it might not be as economically feasible given how frequently things change. So we'd like to see perhaps you could have a stand-up sign on top of the deli counter that lists the items along with their nutritional information. So something that has that flexibility in it, I think.
The other piece I think I noted in there is certainly a time frame that allows you to address an issue. So if they're going to make regulation and just spring it through, which I'm not saying they will do that, but at least to have some minimum guidelines. That if you're going to bring new regulations, we need a minimum of whatever it would be, 6 months, a year, 24, but the initial. But I'm even meaning as we go on, Gary, that if they're going to bring in, you know, we've had a lot of deputations talking about sodium, and that may be something that gets added. Well, again, for you to change your labeling to stay consistent, particularly respecting your ability and the volume that you have to deal with. Again, I don't think anyone's really pushing back on this. It's let's do it in a pragmatic, manageable, consistent manner so that you have ability to adapt and not be in non-compliance.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Final comment? No?
No, that's great.
Very good. Thank you very much. Ms. Jelinek.
My question is along the same line as Bill, in the sense that we have until noon tomorrow to make amendments to the bill. A lot of what you read into the records, to me, are things that will become more meaningful once the regulations are written. But if there are specific showstopper in the bill that could not be clarified in regulations, the only one I have highlighted for now was the standard definition of standard food item. This definition is in the bill. Do you have alternate definitions you would like us to use, or are you leaving us to my creative mind to find that up?
I mean, certainly I'd be happy to recommend some specific language around that. What we've put forward is some components that we've considered that should be included. So I think the language that we've suggested, I haven't written it as sort of the language for clause-by-clause consideration, but that language, and I know it's similar language has been used in other jurisdictions, that talks about items that are intended and marketed for a single serve. That's the kind of language that we've put forward that we'd like to be included.
That's problematic. We all know Kentucky Fried Chicken buckets is not for single use, but is captured by the bill. I have gone down this path before to try to find a new definition and led me to nowhere. So if you have something, to send it forward and we will see. The rest of what you put down, I think none of what I see in the bill, and I know this bill very well, would preclude anything of what you see. Am I right or wrong? Do you see something else in the actual language of the bill that needs to change?
I think, again, the comment with regards to the signage,
Yeah.
that would be, if I was to put forward a specific amendment, that would be one I would raise. I think that's also, in terms of some of the comments that we've heard from other deputants, I would want to make sure that as the members here are going through clause by clause, that I believe it's section 5 that talks about municipal bylaws, that it's very important to our industry that that section is maintained. So I think that that is another thing that we put forward for your consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the both
Thank
of you
you.
coming forward this afternoon. Have a great afternoon. So next we have Mr. Gopal Bhatnagar with us this afternoon. Welcome, sir. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Absolutely, very well done. Sorry, let me just
Thank
go
you.
back to my first slide there.
floor
Thank you
is
very much for having me here this afternoon. I understand my name came up in the legislature, and I'd be happy to address that during the question period, but I wanted to keep my presentation within time. I did want to start off by saying I believe we're here all for the same reason, and I love the presentation that I heard from representatives from Cancer Care, because I think that we cannot regulate tobacco strongly enough, and we're certainly here to try and improve the health of all Ontarians. I'd like specifically, though, to address some concerns and comments that I had around the regulations on the what's been termed the electronic cigarette. Given the short length of time, I just wanted to emphasize a couple of things because they come up repeatedly. The gateway hypothesis, as put forward by Mr. Tom Frieden of the CDC and FDA, has been a mainstay of some of the opponents and some of the discussions around precautionary harm. And the claims made and maintained by several agencies that electronic cigarettes lead to the use of combustibles, especially in minors. Dr. Britton, in fact, referred to this. This is the most recent CDC study out, and you can see here that these are statistics that were referred to. If you read the CDC report online, you'll see, in fact, that they admit that they highlight the fact that e-cigarette use did rise, and that's certainly true. They also noticed that between 2011 and 2014, the rates of tobacco use were quite flat. in youth. However, when we see the rise in electronic cigarette use in the youth survey here, we see this dramatic decrease that's been unprecedented before in the use of tobacco products. So I show you these statistics simply because these are reproducible in Germany as well in the United Kingdom that show indeed that the availability of electronic cigarettes does not seem to have any effect or certainly does not increase youth smoking. So the hypothesis that kids use electronic cigarettes and then switch to combustibles is without any scientific basis to extract that conclusion. Much has been made about the toxicity, and we don't know about vapor. It would take an hour or two to go through a comprehensive analysis of the science behind vapor, but it is very well known now. 3 years ago, I wouldn't make that statement, but the analysis of vapor is a simple chemistry experiment. There are some concerns about heavy metal, cadmium, but the main concern that's been espoused in the literature is that of formaldehyde. There was a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine that much was made about. A press release by the New England Journal of Medicine itself was done. What's not quite advertised is that the lead authors themselves distanced themselves from the New England Journal of Medicine conclusions. Those conclusions were that there was a great deal of formaldehyde created in electronic cigarette use and vapor. Very, very concerning. I think we all understand that formaldehyde is toxic. But let's look at what really happened. The formaldehyde was created by a situation called dry vaping. What that is occurs when the battery power is maximized. You crank the battery to maximum, and you essentially, what the vapors call, burn the coil. That means you create a situation of extraordinarily high temperatures beyond which would normally be used, and it creates this fume. The fume, this does two things. It destroys people's device, so they're voluntarily destroying something that's worth maybe hundreds of dollars. It also creates a fume that is so noxious that it's not inhalable by a human being any more than once by air. So yes, you can create formaldehyde in experimental situations, but is not created in a really user environment. In fact, even the original FDA studies agree that no formaldehyde is created unless you vaporize or you burn the e-juice at over 260 degrees Celsius. E-cigarettes usually function around 60 degrees Celsius. Okay. But there are different types of products as well. Up on the top is the very first generation simplest device, and on the bottom are the more modern or third generation devices. And it's important to make the distinction because they are different. This is one study. Again, I will not read the slide, but it does show that it's important to understand that the first generation devices, there is a number of, there is dual use, which is of concern. But as we become more sophisticated in the technology, the smoking cessation rates rise and the use and dual use declines. That's important because third generation devices are far more technologically comprehensive. They require consumer support. When the people go into vape shops to buy these devices, they need to understand how they're being used. If, in fact, it cannot be properly demonstrated, we have dissatisfaction, we have people returning to smoking. So this is a particular concern to me because I think that specialty and boutique shops should be allowed to be able to demonstrate and promote these devices within the store environment.
Sir.
Thank you very much. Precautionary harm, I do believe that enough data has accumulated in terms of the science of vaping that this, although it was occurred 3 years ago, is now no longer valid. I do have a number of suggestions that I thought were reasonable in that. I certainly advocate that lifestyle advertising should be something that should be prohibited. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll have to move,
Of course,
move on.
understand.
Appreciate that. Ms. Jelinek.
I go first, thank you. Thank you for your presentation, much appreciated. My first question is, I take it you've seen the bills, the different levels of regulation, so we'll take them one by one. Any problem with not letting kids buy those products?
Absolutely not. We've always, I think that any reputable vapor has not looked to sell this to minors.
Okay. We've heard there's lots of variation in the actual flavor cartridges. Any problem with putting some regulations so that no matter where you buy it, we know what's in there?
Absolutely. Manufacturing standards are something that everybody should be arguing for. It's only a positive thing so that the consumers understand what they're getting in a consistent fashion.
Okay. And you seem to put a lot of emphasis that people need help making the right choices
Yes, ma'am.
if they want to be successful. So would that help come in a corner store, or will it come in a store that only does that?
It's a matter of expertise and time. If you walk into a Petro-Canada or you walk into a variety store and you buy a device from a non-vapor, they cannot explain the time. It's not cost effective for them. They don't have the expertise. So we know there's been 2 studies, one recently from Peloso out of Italy, one by Dr. Hickman, that shows that people that have purchased in specialty shops and have that support have increased cessation at the end of 1 year.
So adult-only specialty shop with people that know what they're
Yes, sir.
teaching. How do we know that they know? What if the owner is not there and he asks his daughter that day to sub in?
Yeah. Well, it's absolutely true. Is that, I mean, I think it's likely implausible to suggest that we have a certification course for vapor technicians. But at the same time, if you take from a business model perspective, if you don't have customer satisfaction, then I think it's a business that's going to die off. The vast majority of sales and vaping as it's grown now has been word of mouth. People who have used it successfully, had a good experience, have suggested it to others. Yeah, okay, sure, thank you. So in that, I think if poor customer satisfaction is present, then the business is not viable.
Thank you very much. So we'll move to Ms. Koala from the government.
Thank you very much for being here today. So you are the founder of 180 Smoke, a company.
One of them, yes, ma'am.
Okay. A company which produces and sells e-cigarette products with nicotine in Canada. Have your products undergone the rigorous testing and application process through Health Canada that other smoking cessation and nicotine replacement products are required to go through?
Well, ma'am, we never claimed this at this point in time to be a smoking cessation product, nor nicotine replacement therapy.
And have your products ever gone through the rigorous testing?
We have self-imposed regulatory standards. Our products are sent out to an independent lab.
Not through Health Canada then?
Not through Health Canada.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are you comfortable with the fact that the company that you founded is illegally selling nicotine products?
I take strong exception to the word illegal.
Just by Health Canada's
Well,
standards?
then that's 2 different things. Is that there's a regulatory interpretation by Health Canada. We underdid legal due diligence with our, with our counsel here in Ontario, and have been in touch with the regulatory authorities in Health Canada, and we've as yet not heard back from them from our submission.
A report from the World Health Organization recently concluded that e-cigarettes do not produce merely water vapor, but pose threats to adolescents and fetuses and increase the exposure of non-smokers and bystanders to nicotine and a number of toxicants. Do you share their concerns?
No, ma'am, I do not. I understand that nicotine itself is known to create problems in pregnancy. So that is certainly a separate matter, and that requires regulation and clear warning on the product. There's no doubt about that, just like alcohol does. Yes, sir.
Well, Ms.
So
Ms. Koala has the floor, so
she's giving me the floor, thank you. No?
So whether the risk is benign or not, the risks are there. The risks are there if a child gets a hold of one of these vials. The risks are there if an inappropriate mixture is used and made by a retailer. There are significant risks there if it's used improperly. You've demonstrated the technical details of the equipment, and there are definitely risks there. There's lessons needed in order to be able to use them.
Thank you very much, Ms. Koala. So we'll move
we're
over
erring
now
on the
to-
side of caution.
over to Mr. Hillier.
Just for the record, you are a cardiac surgeon, you are a professor at the University of Toronto?
That's correct, sir. Yes.
I'm just going to not ask you too many questions. I do want to read into the record the Liberal Party tabled 3 reports today to justify their position. One is from the New England Journal of Medicine. If the Liberal members would read it, it says, whether e-cigarettes will prove to be a gateway to the use of combustible cigarettes and illicit drugs is uncertain. That's from the New England Journal of Medicine. One of the other reports that was tabled to justify the gateway view was the intentions to smoke, not actually smoking, just the intention. And the third one, Dr. Britton from Britain mentioned that the increased use in e-cigarettes in that particular school in Hawaii was also viewed as a corresponding and significant drop in actual tobacco use. So I just wanted to get that on the record for the member from Kingston and the Islands. You've put forward some good views. Have you ever seen in your career people who are non-smokers coming in and wanting to use vaporizers, and then progressing on to tobacco after?
Oh, sorry, my practice is limited to cardiothoracic surgery. I don't actually, and I try and separate that entirely from my professional practice. Again, based on data, again, not just my opinion, over 96% of existing vapor users vapor users are current or current smokers. Based on the large-scale data from both Germany, as well as looking at who are non-smokers who use electronic cigarettes, it's the same number of people who've never smoked but still go and buy nicotine gum at a pharmacy. So there are people who just like the nicotine.
Yeah.
They buy the gum and the nicotine. You don't need to prove you're a smoker. The same number of those people use vapor-containing cigarettes.
Well,
Oh,
it's
sorry,
hard to
nicotine
believe
containing.
anybody would go and buy nicotine gum.
Yeah, it's
I've tasted it. It's not.
There's some propensity in people to want to smoke, whether it be the ritualistic behavior or the nicotine itself.
Right.
That's, I said, I neither smoke nor vape, but I empathize with the health outcomes.
Okay,
But
thank
you're-
you very much, Mr. Butnagar, for
Yeah,
coming.
Dr. Batnagar. Ms.
How do you
Crack, yes, I just do want to ask the chair's indulgence, because I do believe that certain comments have been made that impugn my professional reputation. I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon for 15 years. I have absolute every pecuniary advantage when I suggest operations to people. I did so in my clinic today. I've always done so based on the evidence and the science of cardiothoracic surgery, and would never suggest an operation or an intervention to one of my patients. I approach vaping the same way.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate that. Okay, next we have a point of order from Mr. Dixon.
Thank you, sir. I just want to reinsure through the chair that it is our job perhaps to question or to ask questions of our guests, not to make ongoing, continual statements citing a policy. You can ask those questions in that format, as a question format, but I think that's most appropriate. That's the way I've raised and done it that way for 30, 40 years. I just mentioned it to the chair and I don't want to pursue it actively.
Thank you for your point of order. I'm not sure it's a point of order, but thank you for bringing it forward. Okay, next on the agenda we have from 7-Eleven Canada, Inc., Mr. Victor Vrznik, I believe. He's a Government Affairs Manager. I hope I pronounced that right as well. Welcome, sir. You have 5
Thank you, Chair.
minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to present for the Standing Committee on General Government. I'm Victor Vrznik. I'm the Government Affairs Manager for 7-Eleven Canada. And I'm here to speak specifically to the Healthy Menu Choices provision of Bill 45. 7-Eleven operates 500 corporately owned stores from Ontario to British Columbia. Our 100 7-Eleven stores in this province employ approximately 1,000 Ontarians. Our goal is to be the best retailer of convenience for our customers and to be the top retailer on regulatory compliance. 7-Eleven stores are always evolving to respond to the changing needs of our customers. We also recognize that we have a social responsibility to provide our customers with healthy, fresh, and nutritious options while meeting their convenience needs. As part of that effort, we've taken a proactive approach to healthy eating by implementing a program called Better Choices in all 500 stores in Canada, including Ontario, beginning in the new year, which began in the new year. Better Choices provides our customers with access to healthy food and beverage items and transparent nutrition information to help our customers make more informed choices. Under the program, each of our stores displays a nutrition quick reference guide that looks like this in the area of the store where non-packaged food and beverage items are displayed. Maybe I'll just pass this along with your permission.
The clerk.
The guide provides information on calories, sodium, and 12 other core nutrients for approximately 200 non-packaged food and beverage products. Better Choices products, both packaged and non-packaged, have also shelf tags to help customers identify the most healthy and nutritious options, including fruit and vegetables, water, dairy, grains, meats, snacks, and mixed entrees. 7-Eleven is supportive of the Government of Ontario's objective of increasing nutrition transparency and the availability of healthy and nutritious food and beverage items carried by chains. We support the government's efforts to partner with the retail sector on implementation of this bill. The implementation, however, could present some challenges to retailers like 7-Eleven, who introduce between 200 to 400 products in their store every year. New products, that is. By way of background, 7-Eleven stores introduce a new cycle of products approximately every 6 months. Products that do not meet sales targets after a few months are slated for discontinuation. Even for a discontinued product, it can often take several months to work through the sales cycle of receiving and selling fresh product. So until these contracts come to an end. In order to help retailers successfully implement Bill 45, 7-Eleven proposes a 6-month phase-in period that would allow for retailers to test the sales of new products without incurring undue costs associated with menu labeling. Another challenge is that under Bill 45, our stores could be required to create more than 200 calorie labels or tags for all of our unpackaged food and beverage products. Requiring a separate calorie label or tag for every size and flavor of coffee, for example, would lead to signage creep that could defeat the purpose of labeling. Therefore, we recommend that the government allow retailers to post an average of calories for similar food and beverage items that are within a plus-minus range of 20%. Finally, should the government consider future actions to require retailers to post more detailed nutrition information, such as sodium, sugar, and fat, we would recommend that the government adopt a similar model to the 7-Eleven flip chart that's making its way around. The nutrition platform would enable customers to make more informed choices about their food and beverage purchases in an accessible manner. Thank you to the committee for your time, and I welcome any questions.
Well, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that. And we're going to start with the government side. Ms. Hogarth.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'd just like to ask, have you considered whether more information for consumers about the calorie count will aid in product sales testing?
Well, I think absolutely. More information for customers is the goal of our program. That's why we provided, that's why we're reaching toward nutrition transparency by creating a list of products with 13 core nutrients, including calories, sodium, and fat. And I think the better armed our customers are, the more informed choices they'll make, and presumably the more healthier choices they'll make as well.
And you are happy that there will be stakeholder consultation as we proceed with this bill?
Yes, we have already consulted with the ministry, and we look forward to another opportunity as well.
And also that you're also happy that there's a flexibility and nothing's carved in stone at this point?
I guess we'll see how it goes in the process of the development of the regulations, but so far, when we met with the ministry, they were very open and I'll admit very professional in their approach, and we think that there's an opportunity to further continue the dialogue on how these regulations may be rolled out.
Great. We hope we can work together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Walker from the official office.
Pleasure to have you. Thank you so much. Can you just share with me a little bit more of the experience of BC? It seems to me that what you're suggesting is not unreasonable, that by doing either the flip menu or however it's going to be, you've got a large volume of products that are coming and going all the time. Has that worked well in BC? Has there been any follow-up to say that that did work and that the consumer at the end of the day was getting what really the intent of this bill is, their ability to make healthier choices regardless of whether it's a label or a sign?
Well, I think British Columbia is maybe a couple of months behind Ontario, as Bill 45 was, I think, announced in 2014. There's a new bill, I think it's Bill 14 in British Columbia, that's very similar. That's on the other aspects of Bill 45. But in British Columbia, they've taken more of a voluntary approach, and they led the charge on informed dining, for instance. So we've tried to align our program with informed dining, and that's why we've developed the nutritional transparency flip chart. And we've also called out products that align with the BC government's, and maybe this is the point you're getting at. The BC government has a policy on products that go into government buildings, and they have a very high nutritional standard. So we've called out the products in our stores that align with the highest nutritional standard that the BC government expects for the public in their buildings.
Yeah, what I'm trying to gauge is, certainly yourself and the Retail Council of Canada who were on before you, looking at the implication and the actual logistics of changing labeling and the continual turnover in that. If you've got something that's in there that gives me as a consumer the ability to look and say what's healthy, what's not healthy, I don't really care if it's on a label or it's on a nice little flip sign. That's more where I was going, is there's different ways to inform the consumer, and respecting that you have a high volume and items that change on a fairly regular basis. Getting into the labeling could actually lose the baby with the bathwater, because now you're saying, I'm not even going to go down this road.
Well, if our customers don't reference our guide, what they will find is there are a number of products in our store that have a little label that says better choices. This label aligns with the high standards of the BC government's nutritional requirements for government buildings. So that is there in our stores in BC and Ontario and across Canada right now. That's a quick way for our customers to make a better choice.
I mean, I think everybody's supportive of, there's information that's going to help us. It's the delivery method isn't always, it has to be this one or this one. You might have found one that works even better than what the label is. So let's work with you.
And I would just add, if the government were to consider down the road sodium, for instance, that this nutritional flip chart might be a better platform, because it just becomes a bit difficult for our stores with small real estate and so many products to have so much information on a tag. And I say signage creep because eventually people just phase it out and they won't even, it'll lose its impact.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jelena.
Thank you. I know that you know the bill very well. My first question has to do with the 6 months for new products. Is there something in the bill that leads you to believe that this could not happen under regulations? Did you see something in the bill that triggered to you that the moment you put a new products out, you will have to have the calorie count on them?
Well, I guess my understanding of the bill is that for now it applies to all products in the store, all food and beverage products, so that is why we're seeking the exemption. And I understand that maybe that could be addressed in the bill or in regulation, but I guess that is up to the government and the committee to make recommendations on.
Okay, and the idea of being able to regroup food items that are within very close to one another, you have put the number of calories at 20%. I have no idea if you have done the math, but if we were to regroup within a 10%, how many of the groups would explode?
Oh, okay, well, I don't have that that number for you. I could research that and get back to you on that.
Okay, so just so you know, the deadline for us to make amendments to the bill is tomorrow at noon. So I listened carefully to what you've said, and the two flags that I got is making sure that when a new product is introduced, that there is a grace period.
Yes.
And you would like this grace period to be 6 months, so I will make sure that the bill does that. It was my understanding that there was flexibility in the bill to do this, but check again. And the other one is the grouping. There's always been the intention of grouping.
Okay.
At 20%, it could be, we could maybe strike a balance. I was thinking 10, you're thinking 20, how about we settle on 15?
We'll soft at 15.
The idea is that it was always in the bill, but you did not see it, so it could mean that we need to clarify that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And just a reminder, it is 3 p.m. for deadline for amendments tomorrow for all three parties, 3 p.m. Thank you, Mr. Bresnik, for coming before the committee this afternoon. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So we have with us the Canadian Franchise Association. There's three members here, and I will ask you to please come forward and introduce yourselves, please. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. I'm Lorraine McLaughlin. I'm the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Canadian Franchise Association. Joining me is Larry Weinberg, a partner at Castles, Brock and Blackwell. He is also the chair of our Legal and Legislative Affairs Committee at Canadian Franchise Association. And to my right is Erica Kelsey, our Director of Government Relations. So thank you for having us here today to speak on the topic of Bill 45, the Healthier Choices Act. The Canadian Franchise Association was founded in 1967 and is the authoritative voice for franchising in Canada. We have over 600 corporate members nationwide representing many of Canada's best-known franchise brands and over 40,000 franchisees, as well as many small and/or emerging franchise brands. Franchising is an economic engine for Ontario and Canada and generates over $68 billion to the Canadian economy. Franchising directly and indirectly employs over 1 million Canadians, and 88% of our members operate in Ontario. Franchises operate in every community and riding in Ontario and provide benefits to those local communities through new jobs and spending within those communities. CFA's purpose is to promote excellence in franchising, holding the industry and our members to high professional standards, including best practices and a code of ethics that all of our members must abide by. We promote proper due diligence and provide education for franchisors, franchisees, as well as those seeking franchise opportunities. To that effect, we are looking to keep franchising healthy and keep the integrity and professional standards that our members enact on a daily basis. CFA recognizes that Bill 45's threshold for compliance is a chain of food service premises, with 20 or more food service premises in Ontario, which may or may not include franchisors. This threshold of 20, we understand, is arbitrary, just as 19 or 22 would be, and we assume the number was chosen to ensure that burden isn't placed on small businesses to comply. That is understood. While 35% of our members operate in food service, our purpose here is not to discuss the content or intent of Bill 45, Making Healthier Choices Act. We have a specific purpose to address, and that is to discuss the bill's reference to franchising in particular. The concern that we have is simple. In Section 1, Sub 2 of the bill, franchisors are defined as a person who owns or operates a regulated food service premise. That is factually incorrect. The relationship between a franchisor and franchisee is an independent contractual relationship. A franchise is a business relationship bound by a contract, often called a franchise agreement, between the franchisor and franchisee. The franchisor has developed a concept that is owned by him and is the owner of the trademark and operating system. The franchisee is licensed to use the trademark and operating system for a set period of time as defined by the contract. Franchisees are independent small business owners. Franchisees are responsible for the activities of their business and the run of the day-to-day operations of the business, including who they hire, how much they pay their employees, how they schedule their employees, they file their own taxes, maintain ongoing training of their employees, etc., etc. They are responsible for their own debts and obligations and to ensure their own compliance with applicable law. The franchisee is not a glorified manager. They are the owner and operator of a small business and have always had the rights and responsibilities of a small business. Now, we make this distinction not because we suggest that all the responsibilities of this bill should be placed on the franchisee, but to provide you with the clarity on the unique and distinct roles of franchisees and franchisors. The balance of control and the distinction of liability should respect and reflect the nature of the franchisor-franchisee relationship and be fair and consistent, as well as to keep franchising as an attractive investment opportunity for both parties. Franchising is a business model, and each franchise differs in form and function, so applying a blanket approach is not something that can be done. It must be considered that the franchisor may not be the supplier of the menu items or ingredients. In many cases, there are a number of approved suppliers who are third-party companies. In this case, those suppliers or food manufacturers may also have a role to play in terms of compliance with this act. We recommend that roles and obligations be defined in the regulations in this Act in a way that is fair and appropriate. We are happy to consult with the government in that case. However, it is something that will require care and attention in order to ensure that there is no undue or unfair burden placed on any party. Aside from the fact that the definition in Section 1, Sub 2 is factually incorrect, the result of making the franchisor liable for the independent actions of the franchisee will have consequences. It makes the franchising model too risky, less attractive, and thus may undermine future growth,
Thank you very
including
much.
new jobs and indirect and economic input.
I apologize, but we're quite
The
a
rest
bit
is
over.
in the paper that you have.
Thank you kindly. Mr. Walker.
Thank you very much. Just a point of clarification on your deleting of section 3.2, is it one bracket 2?
Yes.
So you just want that totally out of there, and the main reason is because of wording that is too over-specific and actually inhibits some of your concerns.
Yes, we would like that section removed.
And then the B in section 3 is that, again, you're just trying to clarify. So you really want to distinguish that this is the person operating as opposed to you. One of the questions that I've been asked by a couple of delegations is, and it's really just clarification for me. So if I use a Tim Hortons, for example, I trust some things that they would choose as a product are sent by head office, if you will, into that shop in Bruce Grey, Owen Sound. So you may very well be the person who's responsible for negotiating the labeling on that item as opposed to the franchisee. Is that an accurate statement?
In some cases, yes.
Yeah, so the challenge, I think, becomes sometimes the ambiguity of, is it really you as the franchisor or the franchisee who's really in non-compliance? So I can see a situation where it could be one or the other.
And that's why we would like to work, but if I may, part of the issue is if a franchisee has the information and fails to provide it to the customers, we do not want the franchisor
To be liable.
being held liable.
Sure.
And that really is the heart of the concern.
And I guess the opposite being, if someone has something in their store on a shelf and it's been changed, but you as the franchisor central hasn't changed it, I can see where they could be in the same thing if it's not something within their controls to remove. So, I think the intent is, again, for both of you to understand who's liable, who's responsible, and your interest is really just clarifying that to make sure it's black and white going into this. So that amendment would be your expectation.
Yes.
Any other specific interests, just in case you didn't get time to finish? So I've tried to read the whole paper while you were speaking as well.
Thank you. No, it was really the Section 2B, removing the words owns and franchises or licenses be removed.
And as you do this across the country, are there other provinces that have legislation that you think there's wording that's already in effect that we could just utilize?
Not that we are aware of at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Jelena.
I knew that you were going to be coming with this request, so I have talked to many lawyers at Queen's Park. There's many of them around here, always handy. And I'm having a really tough time. A lot of the restaurants that will be captured by Bill 45 operate under a franchise system. So to take it out completely is sort of a non-starter. So then I really try to address what you were talking to us about, which is how do we make sure that if it's the responsibility of the franchisee versus the franchisor, the legal responsibility falls at the right place. So just to make sure, this is what you're after. What you're after is not to say that all of the Tim Horton, McDonald's, and Pizza Hut, and all of the franchise wouldn't have to do menu labeling. That's not what you're after. What you're after is to make sure that the responsibility for failure to comply rests with the right level.
That's exactly correct. And one of the things that we find is problematic is people assume that the franchisor can exert a significant level of control in all areas over the franchisee, and that is not the case. And for a franchisor to exert control inappropriately puts them in violation of other legislation, and this is one of the challenges we wanted to bring to your attention.
Okay, so in it will be the health units who will go in, and if there's ever a non-respect of Bill 45, they would issue fines, some of them quite big. They would have to have the amount of flexibility to really ascertain who it is that made the mistakes or that didn't comply. Is this what you're after? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yes, it would be a reasonable outcome.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move to the government side. Mr. Dixon.
Mr. Chair, thank you and welcome. And MPP Cole has asked to share my question time, Mr. Speaker, so I will do that. So I'll combine my 10 questions into one. I wonder if you could just expand a little more on the liability scenario, like some clarification between franchisee, franchisor, and where does the liability fall? And I just look for a general statement on that. And also, would you agree with implementation of this bill with not necessarily full legislation, but regulations, which gives the government some flexibility, gives the people on the other end some flexibility as well? And I just leave those two with you for starters. Thank you.
I'll defer to Larry on this.
Well, I think it's a fundamental concept of franchising that a franchisee is an independent owner of a business responsible for their own compliance with applicable law. And to Mrs. Gelena's point, we don't look for franchisors to escape all responsibility, but the responsibility should rest with the person who owns the business. In many cases, the contracts between franchisor and franchisee don't necessarily obligate or require or give the franchisor the power to dictate all products used in the restaurant. When you think of franchising, you think always of Tim Hortons, McDonald's, Pizza Hut, but not everyone runs that way. And so the legislation as drafted right now doesn't qualify between a franchisor that dictates the recipe and all the menu items and those that don't. It just says franchisors are deemed to be owner-operators. And from my perspective, and again, I'm not a legislative drafting lawyer, but I've been doing franchise law for 25 years. There are very many different kinds of franchisors in this province, dictated, I should add, by the legislation that governs franchising in this province.
And you're fine with the regulations, sir? I'm just trying to get Mr. Cole some time for a question.
Well, I'm not sure you can correct it entirely by the regulations, because the Act says franchisor is a franchisor, is deemed to be an owner-operator.
Okay, thank you very much. There's 7 seconds, so
7 seconds.
I don't think you're going to have time, Mr.
Forget it.
Cole. So apologize for that. So I believe that's it, right? We did all three. I'd like to thank you all for coming forward this afternoon and providing us with some interesting insight.
We remain at your service.
Thank you very much. Where can I eat? There you go. Next on the agenda, we have the Ontario Society of Nutrition Professionals in Public Health. And we have Ms. Renee Godet.
You say
with
it
us.
so lovely. I don't speak French.
Oh,
I
you
wish
don't?
I did.
Some excuse. Well,
that's
welcome.
okay.
And you have 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I'm here on behalf of the Ontario Society of Nutrition Professionals in Public Health, and we represent over 200 registered dietitians that are working on in the Ontario public health system. We support menu labeling as a population health strategy that helps consumers make informed choices. And I've provided you a copy of our key messages on this topic, as well as a letter that outlines 2 of our recommendations around amendments to Bill 45. I'm going to use my time today to speak about our priority recommendation, and that's the inclusion of sodium alongside calories to the bill. Ontario has shown its commitment to improving the health of children and families through the Action Plan for Healthcare and the Healthy Kids Panel Report. They're clearly invested in the creation of healthy communities that support children's health. Menu labeling is an opportunity to support children's health. Is there an issue?
Be a vote, and we're just waiting to see what time. Unfortunately, we knew this was going to happen. It's a technicality in the House, so we're finding.
Menu labeling is an opportunity to support health by providing families It supports families to help them make decisions about children's diet, and no one would argue that healthy weights and obesity prevention are top priorities for Ontario children. Therefore, it makes sense that calories would be listed on menus in Ontario food premises. Yet OSM-PPH believes there is strong evidence related to sodium consumption. Nearly 25,000 people in Ontario die of cardiovascular disease. Close to 2 million Ontarians are living with asthma, and 14,000 are hospitalized due to stroke every year. The average Canadian, even my own children can't tell you about what it takes to prevent chronic disease, yet they could tell you how to protect themselves against Ebola or protect themselves from getting the flu virus. Yet we aren't seeing those types of deaths and people with illnesses related to those diseases. The average Canadian consumes 3,400 milligrams of sodium per day. That's more than double the recommended adequate intake of 1,500 milligrams for adults and 1,000 to 1,500 milligrams for children. In fact, almost the entire population exceeds the upper tolerable limit, beyond which health risks start to be seen. Most importantly, 77% of children aged 1 to 3 and 93% of children aged 4 to 8 exceed the upper tolerable limit for sodium consumption. According to Stats Canada, 27% of children aged 4 to 8 ate something from a fast food restaurant the day before they were surveyed, and that number jumps to 40% for adolescents aged 14 to 18. And it would be okay if they were choosing healthy food choices, but they're choosing things that are high in sodium, like pizza, hamburgers, hot dogs, and some sandwiches and wraps. And a recent study examined the sodium content of menu items in Ontario restaurant chains and found that the average menu item in a sit-down restaurant had 1,455 milligrams of sodium. That's 97% of the recommended intake in one menu item. And the average children's menu item had 790 milligrams of sodium. That's 66% of the recommended intake. And even scarier, there's certain categories of foods like stir fries and ribs and sandwiches and wraps that exceed the tolerable upper limit in one meal. There is public support for menu labeling. Your own government has pointed out that the vast majority of Ontarians support menu labeling, and that there's national opinion poll that suggests that over 80% of residents want to see both calories and sodium labeled on Ontario menus. I've worked in public health for 16 years, and in that time, I've celebrated alongside colleagues who've had success in the area of tobacco control and alcohol consumption with strong public policy. And every single year, as a nutrition professional in public health, we look to those examples and we try to learn from them and help us implement healthy public policy in the area of nutrition. And never once in those 16 years have I felt as confident as I do today about the evidence that you have regarding the consumption of sodium. Sodium consumption levels are alarmingly high. Sodium content in both sit-down and fast food restaurants is extremely high. You have the government mandate, you have the support of the public, you have the legislative framework right in front of you. Don't delay this decision until future amendments of this bill. OSM-PPH urges you to add sodium now. It's the right thing to do. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much. Right on time. We'll start with the government side. Okay, so you'll have to, I apologize, I was going to try to get at least 2 questions in, but there is a vote in 5 minutes and a half. So we'll go do the vote, we'll come back. Mr. Walker?
May I ask
Just a point of order?
Yes.
Some of the committee's left, so.
It's okay, so ask for
What's the
unanimous
question?
So my unanimous consent is to extend the deadline for Bill 45 amendments to 10 a.m. Friday, April 24th to allow more consultation and ensure that we have the best legislation possible.
Okay, so.
Well, we've asked for unanimous consent.
So we can discuss when we get back.
Okay, is there unanimous consent? Okay, so I just suspend? So the committee is suspended until such time as the vote is over. I encourage everyone back here as quick as possible so that we can provide the questions to Ms. Godet, and as well we have Toronto Public Health after, so let's wait. But, I think we've got quorum. Okay, so we'll call the meeting back to order. We just heard from Ms. Godette concerning her presentation, and I will pass it now to the government side. You have 2 minutes for questioning.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being here, and so sorry to have to run out on you like that. That was awful. Were you consulted by the government on the proposed menu labeling legislation?
We've been involved over several of François Léonard's bills in the past, and we've had lots of input. When it was first introduced in 2013 by the government, we made submissions then and participated in the consultations that occurred on several aspects. So we haven't been consulted this particular year, but we've been involved, I would say, since 2012.
Excellent, okay. Why is a contextual statement regarding daily calorie requirements important?
Well, it's kind of like saying this menu item has 500 calories, but what does that mean to you? So what does it mean in the context of how much you should eat as an adult or a child? So without having the contextual information, it doesn't really provide meaning to the consumer. So we advocate for that to be included.
Okay. In addition to influencing consumers, could menu labeling influence food service providers to offer healthier choices? And is that something that you're hoping for through this bill?
Absolutely. We're hoping, it's interesting that a lot of the evaluative studies that have been done on menu labeling in the US and jurisdictions that have already introduced menu labeling have always studied the outcome of healthy weights as an outcome. Does it help decrease or improve healthy weights as an outcome? But we don't necessarily see that as the outcome that you should be measuring, because the outcome that might occur is the reformulation of products so that industry doesn't have to have menu items like 97% of their meeting 97% of the recommended intake in one item. So we are very hopeful that this population health strategy will result in reformulation of the items that are offered to Ontarians at restaurants. And we've seen that when we introduced labeling on packaged foods. You started seeing industries make claims around the fat content, the sodium content, the cholesterol when cholesterol was a big craze, and trans fat when trans fat was a big craze.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we'll move to Mr. Walker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, and sorry for all the confusion around your deputation. Certainly support your inclusion of that contextual information. I think it's very important. And to your point, it would have been nice to also see a public campaign, an education campaign that would actually accompany this bill, as opposed to some of the things that the government has done in my 3 years here, wasting money on a lot of things that aren't going to make your children aware. It was interesting yesterday, I think the first time I heard, and the number is the same, 71% of the public surveyed want sodium included. So I find it, again, very strange that the government hasn't already. I'm hopeful that they'll be open to amendments to hear that. I think being able to ensure that both children and adults can understand, boy, I can pick this or I can pick this, and this really is my consumption, because I think that's one thing that we really don't, as individuals, pay enough attention to at this point and can have a significant difference. Are there any municipalities, any provinces, any area that you think we can copy that have had that success by putting the sodium? Can you share with me another province or a state or somewhere that has that?
There isn't any in Canada.
Okay. Anywhere else in any of your studies, any of your research?
I'm not aware of anywhere that has included sodium. Definitely there's examples that have included calories. In voluntary approaches, there's been examples of providing more than just calories and sodium, providing more information than that, but no, not as a legislative approach.
Thank you. Do I have still time left? Chair.
You had 20 seconds.
Thank you. May I move that the deadline for amendments to Bill 45 be extended to 10 a.m. Friday, April 24th, to ensure that we can actually spend as much time as possible to implement amendments that are going to make sure this legislation truly is making it the most healthy choice.
I'm going to rule, Mr. Walker, that we're going to continue with the questioning towards the deputy town. So, Ms. Jelinek.
Thank you so much, René, for being here. And again, sorry about the kerfuffle, but we had to go vote. Given everything that you have told us, I sort of already know the answer, but I've asked it to everybody, so I'll ask it to you too. Can you think of any good reason why we should not move with sodium labeling at the same time as we move with calorie labeling? Is there value in the incremental approach, rather than let's get this done right with calories and sodium in Ontario in the near future, which would be months away, but both of them at the same time, rather than one now and one at a future yet to be determined, if ever?
My short answer would be there's absolutely no value in waiting. I think it needs to be done now. The evidence is strong. There's no reason for us to delay it. And I think in delaying it, we're putting Canadians or Ontarians at risk. We do every day. People don't know what they're eating at restaurants, and they need to know. So I don't think there's any value in delaying. It should be done. Should have been done when you first introduced it.
Agree. My next is to add reference value, contextual value, so that the way the bill is written now, basically leaves it to regulations. The arguments behind it is that those values could change over time and you wouldn't want to have to go back. But all that you're asking that in the bill we see that reference contextual values be added to the menu or menu board, but those actual values, whether it be 1,700 milligram of sodium, 2,000 calories, those would be made in regulation. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is this what you're asking us to do?
Yes. So the bill would state that a reference value or a contextual statement be required, but then the regulations would stipulate how that would be worded and what it would look like.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and thank you very much, Ms. Godette, for coming before committee again. We apologize.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next on the agenda, we have from the Toronto Public Health, Mr. David McEwen, Medical Officer of Health. Welcome, sir. You have 5 minutes, followed by... is it a procedural type of point of order? I'll hear the point of order, and then I might have to cut you off.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted to clarify something that was read into the record yesterday by a member of the opposition, Mr. Hillier.
No, that's not a point of order, but thanks. Good try. So, Mr. McEwen.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you very much for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is David McEwen. I am the Medical Officer of Health for the City of Toronto and the Executive Officer of the Toronto Board of Health. And I'll be speaking on behalf of both of us with respect to Bill 45 today. I would like to state up front that Toronto Public Health, the organization I work with, and the Toronto Board of Health commend the government for taking the step to bring forward this bill, which I believe will be an important measure to improve the health of all Ontarians. The Board of Health and I have been advocating strongly for many of the changes included in this bill over the past 2 to 3 years. We're very pleased to see that the science is being brought to bear on public policy in this area. In addition to the written submission that was sent to this committee on behalf of myself and the Board of Health, there are just 2 of the issues that I'd like to speak to you verbally about today. First, the current menu labeling proposal does not require sodium values to be posted alongside calorie counts on the menus or menu boards at restaurant chains that the proposed legislation would govern. And I heard you having this conversation with a previous speaker. The evidence from analysis of menus from major chain restaurants in Canada has shown that many restaurant foods contain high levels of sodium as well as calories. In fact, a University of Toronto study revealed that the average sit-down restaurant meal, with entree and side dishes included, what we would normally eat, contains 56% of an adult's daily calorie requirements, but 98% of an adult daily limit for sodium. And we know that intake of excess sodium can lead to a range of different serious problems for health, including high blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, and kidney disease. If we were to reduce sodium intake in our population to the recommended level for good health, this would decrease the incidence of hypertension, for example, in Canada by about 30%, and that's a very big change in population health. It would represent more than 23,000 cardiovascular disease events fewer per year across the country, an amount which would equal about $18 million in direct and indirect health cost savings. The evidence that current unhealthy sodium intakes can be reduced in part by providing the right information to consumers. For example, a University of Toronto study again revealed that about 1/4 of participants would change their menu selection after seeing calories and sodium added to the menu. Another study by the University of Waterloo found that 38% of participants reported that nutrition information on the menu influenced their choice. In addition, there's emerging evidence that what restaurants put on their menus influences what the restaurants do themselves. And this is certainly not unexpected when we look at transparency initiatives for food safety and pollutant inventory release. Transparency does make a difference in the behavior of organizations. There's also, fortunately, evidence that consumers would support this requirement. A recent panel survey of about 3,000 Canadians found that 75% would like to see calories on the menu, and 71% would like to see sodium values. These are by far the two nutrients that, when asked, poll recipients are most interested in seeing. And these findings were similar for a subsample here in Toronto. About 79% would like to see calories, and 74% would like to see sodium values posted. So this is something that consumers want. Current evidence does support that the posting of both calorie and sodium values on restaurant menus are important, and they should both be reflected in the final legislation which is passed. I'd also like to speak briefly to proposed changes to the Smoke-Free Ontario Act. I'm very pleased to see that the proposed bill includes a number of important measures that we and other advocates have been arguing for, such as additional powers for local public health inspectors to be able to test the products used in water pipes. This has been a real barrier for enforcement. Increasing enforcement mechanisms and fines, and particularly providing clarity on where e-cigarettes can be used and prohibiting the sale of e-cigarettes to minors. Also, very pleased to see that the Smoke-Free Ontario Act will be amended to ban the sale of all flavoured tobacco products in Ontario. And this is important. A recent University of Waterloo research study found that more than half of youth tobacco users in grades 9 to 12 used flavoured tobacco products. These are very attractive for young people starting to smoke. Nearly a third of those smoked menthol cigarettes. So this demonstrates youth's preference for flavours and for strong appeal of menthol cigarettes in particular. I would ask the committee, however, to amend Bill 45 by adding that the ban on flavoured tobacco products be effective immediately, essentially on the date that the bill is proclaimed into law, and by removing a section 6.13, which appears to unnecessarily allow for an exemption clause for the banning of designated flavoured tobacco products. It might treat some flavours differently than others. I don't think there's any justification for that based on our understanding of how flavoured products attract youth. And I'd also like to end by recommending that for any of the provisions of the legislation which are intended to be enforced by local boards of health, such as ours, that sufficient funding be provided to enable credible enforcement. I think credible enforcement is an important part of introducing any kind of legislative change, and particularly during the introductory period of the new requirements.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your input. Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Dr. McEwen. A couple quick ones. One would be, certainly the sodium has come up a number of times, both today and yesterday. I think that's one that we've all kind of been brought to our light. And I think it's important to keep it simple. So one of the concerns I have is I think the regulation allows more and more and more to be added. My concern would be sometimes if we get too much, we might actually confuse. So the simplistic, the better. Is there any reason why just similar to sodium that sugar wouldn't be one of those other key? Because I think it's one of those ones as well that certainly may impact who eats what product or drinks.
When we looked at both the science and the policy implications of making this information available, clearly you can't have too much on a menu. It just won't fit, for one thing. The argument for calories and sodium as the top two, if you like, I think is very strong, both in terms of consumer demand, impact on health, and what the research says about impact on people's behaviors. I wouldn't go much beyond the two. I think that information on all of the nutrients should be available, but not on the menu.
Right, thank you. The other is an e-cigarette. So a lot of the deputations that have came forward and those that have sent it in have said actually that the flavor certainly has an impact on those using that product as a cessation tool or a lifestyle choice. So my one concern is that I understand what you're saying with the youth and that if that's inducing them, But on the other hand, what we heard from a lot of the adults who are trying to quit smoking tobacco, that is a big piece for them. So my fear would be if we go one way, what do we gain and what do we lose on the opposite side? And certainly as someone who's lost a sister to lung cancer, I would much rather err there. And I think there's other things that are also enticing youth to smoke. I've raised it here a number of times, contraband, and making it illegal for youth to actually possess and or sell tobacco. So can you just give me a little bit there? I know time's running out.
In terms of e-cigarettes, I think we need to treat them. We don't really know how e-cigarettes are going to unfold. It's a new kind of nicotine delivery system. I think that the measures in the bill are a good initial step to hold the tide so that we're not seeing sales to minors, we're not seeing as wide availability and use as we might see. In terms of their use as a cessation aid, if they can be shown through good science to be an effective cessation aid, then they should be regulated in the same way as all the other cessation aids, and I don't think there's anything in the bill that would prevent that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that, and we shall move to Ms. Jelinek.
I will repeat myself, but I've asked everyone. You're the last one, so I will ask you also. Can you see any reason why we should not move forward with sodium labeling at the same time as calorie labeling? Is there an argument to be made that we should roll out the calorie labeling and sometimes down the road at a date yet to be thought of, we will roll out sodium?
I can't think of any argument for that. In fact, if I was a restaurant operator, I would probably rather change the menus once rather than twice.
And be done. Okay, the next question is very similar. Can you think of a valid reason why we would not ban menthol at the same time as we ban every other flavor of tobacco?
None at all.
No. The science doesn't support it.
Treating it differently? No, not in my view.
Okay. There's also a section in the bill that prohibit agencies like yours to go further than what the bill has, and that specifically has to do with the calorie labeling. If we only do go with calorie and sodium is not added, has the Toronto Public Health Unit ever looked at regulating for your jurisdiction?
If the provincial government had not moved forward with this legislation, we would have looked at that, doing it locally. I understand the usefulness of having a level playing field across the province, but we've also often seen public policy advance through innovation at the local level, which demonstrates feasibility, demonstrates public acceptability, and then we can see how it can be done on a larger canvas.
And although I support the statements that you've made that you want resources for credible enforcement by the health units of those new measures, I doubt if this is something you will see in the bill, but I certainly support making sure that the bill comes with teeth. And if people are not respecting the calorie labeling or the flavor ban or whatever, that the health units have the resources to make sure that they comply with the law. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Hogarth, we'll move to the government side.
Good afternoon. I'd just like to say that I'm definitely an advocate for children and youth, being a former elementary teacher, and I think Bill 45 will help to protect children and make them live at least as long as this generation, and right now that's not what the research says is going to happen. So I'm very pleased with this bill, and I do believe that there's flexibility in it. Do you believe there's flexibility in this?
I believe the measures in the bill are an important way of protecting children from tobacco, for example, and of course, when they're making their own decisions at restaurants, from excess exposure to both sodium and calories.
Good. Are you concerned that having different regulations in different towns and cities across Ontario may be onerous on business and confusing to consumers?
I think that is a real issue. We certainly, when we try and legislate at the local level, try and work with surrounding jurisdictions to try and keep the playing field level for business. However, I don't think that should stop us from doing the right thing for the health of the population.
Okay. Were you consulted by the government on the proposed menu labeling legislation?
Well, I actually reported to my Board of Health on this matter before the government brought the legislation forward, so we were advocates. We did have an opportunity to provide input in the earlier consultations in 2013.
Okay. And do you believe Bill 45 takes an appropriate approach to regulating e-cigarettes in Ontario?
Yes, it's very close to the approach that I recommended to the Board of Health.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
Okay,
Correct the record.
thank you very much. Ms. Kiwala, on a point of order to correct your record.
To correct a record, yes. There was a statement read into the record yesterday by the member from Frontenac,
That's
Lennox,
not
and
a point.
Addington.
Is it a point to correct your record on what you actually
Not
said?
my
or is
record.
it- Okay, so it's only permitted that a member can correct their own record. So it's not a point of order. What time is it? So we're going to be adjourning at 6 according to the clerk, so you have a few seconds.
That's all I need, Mr. Chair.
Walker.
I would like to move that the deadline for amendments to Bill 45 be extended to 10 a.m. Friday, April 24th, to ensure that we have the ability to include as many of the amendments that we've heard in our deputations.
It's budget day.
It's only an extra couple of hours. It allows ultimate.
Okay, so Mr., a little bit of order, please, as I consider the motion. Thank you very much. So that Mr. Walker has moved extending the deadline. The deadline has been set by this committee it was done on April 13th for 3 p.m. tomorrow, which is April 23rd. Is there any further discussion? What are you extending it to, Mr. Walker?
We extend it to 10 a.m. Friday, April 24th.
10 a.m. Friday.
Because of budget day tomorrow, we're not going to have much time to ask them.
Okay.
Trying to work with you to get the best legislation.
So it's 6 o'clock?
You don't want to do that.
So unfortunately, it is 6 o'clock. I can't call the vote. The meeting has to be adjourned. I apologize. I was good before, but this meeting is adjourned.